Hello everyone, welcome back to Believer Science Academy, Bengaluru. This is daily news analysis session. In this session, we will be discussing few important topics which are very important from UPSC prelims, mains as well as interview perspective. The first article for the day is 7th February 2025. The article talks about, it is an editorial from the Hindu. It talks about issues in India's diagnostics sector. What is diagnostics? Diagnostics is nothing but checking if a person has a disease or not. Okay, many people have diseases, but they are not aware that they possess that particular disease. Okay, it is the diagnosis process which lets a person know whether they are possessing a disease or not. Okay, the diagnostic sector valued at 860 billion rupees in financial 2024 and projected to grow to 1275 billion by financial 2028 remains largely under-regulated and fragmented, with critical challenges affecting quality, accessibility and affordability. Okay, so the article talks about regulatory gaps and lack of standardization. Okay, the Clinical Establishment Act of 2010, which is meant to regulate labs, has been adopted by only 12 states and most union territories, but implementation remains weak. And voluntary accreditation by NABL exists, but a large number of small unregulated labs continue to function with inconsistent quality standards. Okay, it is in labs where the tests are done, where a person's health is checked, whether a person is possessing a disease or not is found out in the labs, and these are actually regulated under Clinical Establishment Act of 2010, which is a central law, but only 12 states have adopted that one, and at the state level they are not properly working. Then shortage of skilled manpower. Another major issue is many diagnostics labs operate without qualified pathologists, with the technicians issuing reports, sometimes fraudulently using doctor signatures. Okay, so technicians are working as doctors in these labs. It is found in many rural and semi-rural areas, semi-urban areas in India. Rural areas face a severe shortage of trained microbiologists and laboratory technicians, leading to diagnostic errors. Then ghost pathologists. Who are these? Pathologists lending their signatures to multiple labs remain a widespread issue. That pathologist will not even be going to the lab, but he will be providing the signature so that the lab can use the signature to conduct certain tests. He will be getting certain commission from those labs. So these are the various issues in labs in India. And the other issue is urban-rural divide. That is, only 24% of the diagnostic revenue, comes from rural areas, despite nearly 70% of the population residing in rural areas. Okay, so, and government labs often lack basic infrastructure, specialist and operational hours, forcing rural patients to rely on expensive private labs. Okay, just like the government institutions in every other sector, the government labs in the medical sector also lacking in efficiency and lacking in basic infrastructure, specialists, etc., etc. As a result, obviously, even the poor people from the rural areas are forced to attend to the private labs, which are very expensive, which is in turn putting burden on their out of the pocket expenditure. Then other issue are pricing concerns and government's initiatives. The private sector dominates the diagnostics, leading to higher cost. Okay, what is the main motive behind privatization? Profit maximization. Obviously, they are going to focus on maximizing the profit. Government initiatives like Telangana's T diagnostics and Kerala's Ardhra mission aim to provide affordable diagnostic services, but supply chains issue hamper the effectiveness. Okay, so despite the goodwill of the government, because of the supply chain issues, they have not been able to provide proper benefits. And on the challenges faced by the labs, the small and medium sized labs face strict space and licensing regulations, making operations unviable. State specific requirements such as Tamil Nadu's minimum space mandate for labs could lead to closure of many small labs. The lack of recognition for paramedical qualifications from other states further limits workforce availability. Then the article also calls for a stronger regulation and provides certain suggestions. The author of the editorial says that experts suggest expanding licensing requirements, enforcing accreditation, and setting up mandatory standard operating procedures for testing and reporting. Strengthening existing acts like Karnataka's KPMP Act, KPME Act could improve quality assurance and patient safety. So the sector is poised for rapid growth but requires urgent regulatory interventions to ensure standardization, skilled manpower, and accessibility to quality diagnostics services across the India. Okay, so the main issues with respect to diagnostics are: one is regulation. The Central Act is not accepted by many of the states, and another one is related to infrastructure. Basic infra is not available. Another one is urban and rural divide. Another one is lab size, and another one is state or the government's initiatives but the supply chain issues which are plaguing this operation. Okay, so this act, that is Clinical Establishment Act of 2010, even though it is present, it has not been accepted by many states. Remember the term ghost pathologist. Okay, then moving on to the second editorial or the second second editorial or article, it talks about primary lessons from the Reagan air crash. Okay, so recently, just a few 4 days back, there was a very deadly crash, an unfortunate event between an aeroplane and a helicopter that shows the significance of such crashes and the lessons that can be learned here. This editorial is written by Captain A. Mohan Ranganathan, who is a famous personality in aviation sector. So editorial reads: the tragic mid-air collision on January 29, 2025 involving a US Army Black Hawk helicopter and American Airlines CRJ-700 resulted in 67 fatalities and highlights critical human factor issues, investigation flaws, and political interference in aviation safety. Okay, so in this crash there was political blame game over safety issues. One is the premature accusations, that is the US President Donald Trump hastily blamed former President Barack Obama and Joe Biden for diluting the air safety standards, ignoring his whole role during his term. Similar political blame game were seen in India's 2010 Mangalore crash, where the Minister of Civil Aviation falsely claimed full compliance with ICAO standards. Okay, so they are trying to compare a recent crash in Reagan to the various crashes that happened over the world, including India, and how these crashes most often lead to political blame games. Transparency in investigations, USA versus India. There was an open investigation in the USA, that is, radar and air traffic control audio were publicly made available, enabling independent analysis. Whereas in India, the investigations were less transparent and were more opaque. That is, lack of detailed flight recorder data in Indian accident reports. Bureaucratic interference ensures no incriminating evidence is published. Okay, and third is human factors and pilot misidentification. In this particular crash, there was a helicopter pilot error. At night, the Black Hawk pilot relied only on the navigation lights and the flight number, increasing the risk of misidentification. And possible confusion with the second aircraft on the approach. Okay, so they should have been more vigilant. And situational awareness failure. The pilot followed the wrong aircraft, leading to a collision. The collision's avoidance system was inhibited below 1000 feet, preventing an alert as well. Okay, various issues, but mainly human error was also reason behind this one. Then press on it is or hurry syndrome. One is cognitive fixation, that is, pilots often develop tunnel vision, leading to fatal mistakes. Single ATC control. Normally, two controllers should be on duty at Reagan Airport, but because of the fatigue and stress, there was only one single ATC controller, and fatigue and stress likely contributed to the poor judgment in this particular case. Then historical accidents and systematic failures. 1996 Charki Dadri mid-air collision in India. 349 fatalities due to pilot non-compliance and mismanagement. DGCA official removed after submitting an unfavorable report. Last 9 minutes of Saudi flight recorder was missing in this particular case. And 2024 South Korea crash. Aircraft landed gear up, hitting an instrument landing system antenna and was not frangible, violating ICAO Annexure 14 standards. Okay, the standard says that the antennas should be frangible, meaning whenever they are collided with the aircraft, they should be easily destroyed and it should not impact the aircraft. And even in this issue, the last 4 minutes of flight data recorders were missing. And finally, there are safety lapses in Indian aviation as well. Bengaluru 2022 near collision, that is, two Indigo flights departed from parallel runways, almost colliding into each other. Incident was covered up until a safety audit exposed it. And in Tiruchirappalli 2024, Air India Express flight suffered hydraulic failure but circled for 3 hours instead of making an immediate overweight landing. Media and politicians misrepresented the pilot's actions, turning it into a heroic event instead of a safety failure. And finally, what are the key lessons that should be learned from aviation safety? Are the human error and misidentification can lead to tragedies. Political interference and media sensationalism obscure real safety issues. Transparent investigations are crucial for learning from past mistakes. ATC workload, pilot fatigue, and situational awareness must be addressed. And finally, India's aviation safety culture needs reforms with a greater transparency and accountability. Very important article, especially for attending the interview this year. You can expect the questions on this one. Then, third editorial, it is also from the the Hindu. It talks about the saga of regulating India's thermal power emissions. Okay, this was written by Ashok Srinivas. The article talks about regulating thermal power emissions in India. So, the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change, that is MOFCC, has once again delayed compliance with sulfur dioxide emission norms for thermal power plants, extending the deadline by 3 years without providing any justification. This is a part of decade-long regulatory saga characterized by policy delays, shifting debates, and financial burdens on the consumers. Then, shifting deadlines and delayed compliance. The original deadline for the compliance was December 2017. Since then, multiple extensions have been granted, with the latest in December 2024, pushing sulfur dioxide compliance to December 31, 2027. This affects 20 gigawatts of thermal capacity, primarily in densely populated areas. Okay, so instead of providing for the compliance, instead of pushing for the compliance, the MOFCC keeps on delaying the compliance. Initial regulations and debate over compliance. In December 2015, MOFCC revised norms to align with global standards, example Australia, China and the US. Instead of focusing on how to meet the norms, the debate shifted to whether they were needed or not. Flue gas desulfurization technology, that is flue gas desulfurization technology, very important point, became central to the discussion despite not being mandated. So what are the arguments against FDGs included was, FDGs or the flue gas desulfurization setups are high installation, the cost of installation is very high, and they have a long gestation period, and it will increase the coal consumption, leading to higher greenhouse gas emissions. These are the reasons for not implementing LDG. Then, conflicting government reports and policy diversion. The Central Electricity Authority 2020 reports suggested a phasing out of compliance till 2035. IIT Delhi study acknowledged air quality benefits but recommended extended timelines due to cost and supply chain constraints. And Niti Aayog NEERI report questioned the need of sulfur dioxide norms, shifting focus to particulate emissions instead of sulfur dioxide norms. As a result, MOFCC diluted the norms and created multiple compliance deadlines based on the location and emission type. Okay, see, first the Central Electricity Authority, they have asked for phasing out, and then the IIT Delhi study, it said that you need quality benefits are there for this reducing the sulfur dioxide, but there should be extended timelines because it is costly. And then Niti Aayog, it questioned altogether, it questioned whether sulfur dioxide norms are needed or not. It only focused only on the particulate matter emissions. As a result, MOFCC took decisions on that sulfur dioxide compliance is not necessary for 3 more years. Okay, so there is so many confusion with respect to sulfur dioxide. Then the confusion is because of lack of transparency in monitoring compliances. December 31, 2024 was the deadline for other emissions such as particulate matter. However, pollution control boards or PCBs do not provide publicly accessible verification data on the compliance. We are not sure whether they complied or not. Okay, and financial burden on the consumers. Many thermal plants already initiated FDG installations due to evolving deadlines. Electricity regulators allowed costs of pollution control equipments to be passed on to the consumers regardless of the compliance. Current situation is 22 gigawatt of plants have installed FDGs, 102 gigawatt is in advanced stages of FDG implementation. So only 50% of the installed capacity is in advanced stages, and only 10% of the plants have installed FDGs. Given the extended deadlines, plants may not operate their FDGs, as doing so would increase electricity generation cost and make them less competitive. Okay, so since the deadline has been increased, even the plants which have already implemented which already have FDGs are not going to operate them, because FDG operation is costly, and if it is costly they have to increase the consumer price. If they are charging more for the consumers, consumers are not going to buy from those institutions or those thermal plants. So even though they have FDGs, they are not going to use it. Result will be consumers pay for unused equipment while communities near thermal plants continue to suffer from air pollution. Okay, this aspect has been ignored by MOFCC. So here talks about delayed action. The cost of delayed action would be the institutional, environmental, health and financial cost of this policy delay are substantial. Unlike the Birbal's Khichdi fable, where patience led to a lesson learned, this saga may not result in the right lessons being drawn. India risks prolonged pollution exposure without clear accountability or a firm resolution to enforce emission norms. Then, so this is the third editorial, very important. Some key points are there in that article. Do note on these key articles, and you can read those answers or read those points in your answers. Okay, fourth one, which I found to be very important given the present context of debate or ChatGPT versus DeepSeek versus what does India has to offer. Okay, that is a debate going on. So this article, it talks about, should India build a sovereign fundamental AI model? The debate is national pride versus financial constraints. Okay, the discussion on whether India should build its own foundational AI model revolves around sovereignty, economic feasibility, and innovation potential. While some argue that sovereignty and national security concerns justify investment in AI models, others believe leveraging the existing open source models is more a pragmatic approach. Okay, second point of the debate is sovereignty concerns and AI independence. So this is this was an interview in the Hindu paper. It talks about the Pranesh Prakash. He says that India should develop AI expertise, but sovereignty is not a major concern as open source models like DeepSeek R1 exist already. If the US imposes sanctions on AI model, India could still modify and adopt open source models from DeepSeek. The real sovereignty risk lies in hardware, as India lacks advanced chip manufacturing capabilities. Very important points. Very important points. People may be asking, why is India not developing its own AI model? US has ChatGPT, etc., etc. China has DeepSeek. Why is India not doing anything now? One of the major reason is that leave about the investment. The hard disk or the hardware required for, not the hard disk, hardware required for developing a sovereign, a foundational AI model is the requirement of chips. Okay, so India doesn't possess advanced chip manufacturing capabilities. So first we should focus on chip manufacturing capabilities as well. Then Thanuj Bhojwani, okay, he says that sovereignty matters, but the real bottleneck is the GPUs. India lacks access to cutting edge chip fabrication like TSMC, that is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Without high performance computing resources, AI model development remains limited. Okay, then financial viability and market limitations. It talks about AI training costs are extremely high. One is DeepSeek V3 was trained for $5.6 million, but trial and error costs push a real investment to hundreds of millions. India's enterprise AI market is very small, making monetization very difficult. Okay, so in DeepSeek there are many variants. R1 is open source, whereas V3 is a paid one. For here, if you are investing 5.6 million, even then it is more remunerative, because people in the Western countries or China or more developed countries are willing to pay for these AIs, whereas in India, even if you are spending so much and develop a foundational AI model, people are not willing to pay for the subscription of this AI model. As a result, monetizing these kind of foundational models in India after spending so many amounts of millions of dollars is not very easy. In the US, AI replaces human labor, but in India, labor costs are already low. Okay, then labor costs are so low that investing or providing the labor costs are less cheaper compared to investing in this AI model at the present given context. Then government investment challenges. AI development requires significant failed experiments. That is 90% of the funding may be spent on the failures itself. India's public procurement system is not designed for high risk, high failure investments. Okay, India's public and procurement system is focused mainly on the result basis. You cannot have that advantage, okay, or the leeway of focusing on high risk, high failure investments. And alternative approach is focusing on AI applications and building ecosystems. Instead of building a large scale foundational model, India should leverage the existing AI models which are open source or modified, investing in AI applications tailored to local languages and needs. Example, Indic Trans 2, text to speech for Indian languages, etc. etc. Foster AI innovation through startups, academia, and research grants. So the argument here is instead of chasing a moonshot foundational model, India should fix research and R&D investment gaps to naturally foster innovation. Okay, you cannot push for the like AI innovation presently. Instead of that, you can push for the research and development so that you can foster the innovation. Okay, and government's India AI mission and GPU subsidies. It is a positive step that the government's plan to subsidize GPU clusters helps startups and academia. The limitation is India's total budget for AI infrastructure is lower than the cost of training Meta's Llama 4 model, which was around $60 million. Practical use is that subsidies should focus on niche AI applications where India can compete effectively rather than rivaling models like ChatGPT or DeepSeek. Okay, what we need is only to compete effectively. We don't need to rival the models like ChatGPT and DeepSeek. Okay, even if you are competing effectively, that should have practical use. That should be more remunerative for Indian companies as well. So in the conclusion, the author says that we need a strategic, resource efficient AI roadmap. That is, instead of investing in building a sovereign foundational model, India should focus on enhancing AI applications for local use cases, developing AI research and private sector collaboration, investing in chip manufacturing and GPU access to remove infrastructure bottlenecks. A very important article with so much of knowledge provided here and so much of opinions provided here. Do note down these opinions. You can use this in your answers, or you can also use this in your interview as well. Next, there is a small topic on Fort William. It was in news because Fort William in Kolkata, which is the headquarters of Eastern Army Command, has been renamed to Vijayadurg recently. This is the Fort William and has been renamed to Vijayadurg. It is present in Kolkata. So about Fort William, it is a pre-independence era fort. It was built by British in 1773 and was named after King William III of England. It is located on the eastern banks of River Hooghly in Kolkata. Today, it is the property of Indian Army. Also serves as the headquarters of Eastern Command. The history is that it was built by English East India Company in 1696. Initially, it comprised wings and an inner bastion where prisoners were held, which is why it is famously known as the Black Hole of Calcutta. And 1756, Sirajuddaula attacked the fort and captured it. As a result, many people died in this one, that is known as Black Hole tragedy. After the fall of Sirajuddaula, the Battle of Plassey, fort was demolished by the Britishers. Thereafter, Robert Clive began constructing a new fort. The fort was completed in 1773 and stands as a present-day Fort William. So the architecture, the fort is octagonal in shape and has an imposing structure made out of brick and mortar. It's spread over 70.9 acres and is embellished with hundreds of arched windows that overlook the lush green gardens. Meticulous stonework adorns the surface of building. Very small, but can be important from your prelims this year. Then a Santorini Island. Why it is in news? Because thousands of residents have fled to the island of Santorini after a swarm of earthquakes shook the Greek islands and in the Aegean Sea on Tuesday morning. This is the Santorini Island. If you have seen any Bollywood movies or like any Indian movies, you might have seen songs have been shot in this island and these locations, etc., etc. This is the Santorini Island. Okay, very beautiful island with very lot of emphasis for the infrastructure, mainly for the tourist. So, Santorini or Thera is a volcanic crater island that is located in the southern part of Aegean Sea of the Greece. It is the southernmost island of the Cyclades island group. It is located approximately 128 nautical miles southeast of Greek mainland and about 63 nautical miles north of Crete, the largest Greek island. It is the remaining portion of an exploded volcano and forms the most active volcanic center of the South Aegean volcanic arc. Santorini's volcano is one of the few active volcanoes on the Greek and European land. It is well known for its sea-filled volcanic caldera that is surrounded by high colorful cliffs and on its three sides. It is also known for its pristine whitewashed houses spread across the jagged cliffs, astonishing blue waters and dramatic views, fabulous sunsets and the ancient settlement of Thera. Okay, so these are the 6 articles and 6 points I want to discuss with you in today's news analysis. This ends our discussion for the day. If you like the video, then please hit the like button, comment on the video and also share with your friends. With this, I will end the session. Jai Hind.